So how do you create a sustainable structure in your company or in your business that's going to generate consistent results, short term, long term? Well, I'm going to share my thoughts in this video. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge, Now What? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And the goal of this channel is to help those of you that find yourself now in positions of leading a team, a division, a project, or even a business, build the skills necessary to generate your results and build high-performing team. Each week, I'm going to share some tips and strategies that have helped build my business, bring in some guests to share their thoughts on the same topic so that you can get the tools you need, fill your manager toolbox up so you can generate consistent results in your business. So let's dive into today's topic, structure. Now, I know that sounds a very odd word, but building a structure in your business seems to be one of the hardest things for new managers to embrace. Process is another word that comes to mind. And again, these are things that are not flashy. They're not sexy. But if you think of the best performing companies, if you think of the best performing sports teams that year in and year out deliver results, they may not always win, right? So if you think of a sports team, they don't win a championship every single year, but they're in contention. They've put themselves in a position to challenge the results that they want, that goal, that mission that they have. They've built it up in a way so that there are repeatable processes. So no matter who they bring in onto their team, they bring them in because they have certain skills or certain traits that they think fit their culture. And then they have a process for them to follow so that they can use those skills to generate the results. So if you think again of the top performing teams, these players don't come in and do whatever they want. They follow what that structure is for successful teams. Those teams that underperform year in and year out, usually either they don't have a structure in place or the people feel that they can do whatever they want to because of their own self-worth. So it's the person before the team. Successful teams, it's teams before people. And translate that to companies. If you think of the biggest companies, the most successful companies, again, they're used all the time as examples because they are those companies that have repeatable results. The Disneys of the world, the Ritz-Carltons of the world, the Apples of the world. The employees coming into Disney, I had friends for years. I was an actor for years, and I had friends who worked for Disney. My niece now has worked on a couple Disney cruises. So if you think of that, she isn't going into that saying, well, here's what I want to do. They put you through a very rigorous interview process or audition process, and there are rules that you have to follow or else you cannot be part of Disney. And there's no debate about it. Maybe there's a warning once, second time you're no longer there. You can go to any Ritz-Carlton around the world and you're going to get the same level of service because it's the Ritz-Carlton way. It isn't the Ritz-Carlton here in Princeton, New Jersey, and then the Ritz-Carlton in New York does something different and the Ritz-Carlton in London does something different. They've built a structure. They've built processes in order for their company to have repeatable procedures. Think of a franchise. Think of fast food. We go to certain fast food restaurants or what we've called chain restaurants because we're comforted by the fact that no matter where I am, if I drive through a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Wendy's, or if I go to a Panera Bread or whatever your favorite chain is, you understand, you know what you're going to get because they've built it that way. Versus maybe a local restaurant or a non-chain restaurant. Well, we have to go dive into, look in reviews to check in, get advice. Hey, have you heard about this restaurant? What do you think about this restaurant? In order to gauge, should we go in and take the chance? So all of that frames out for you as a leader of a team, or if you're taking over a business or you're a general manager, or you're in a position to drive the ship You have to think about the structure. Usually when people are brought in to take over teams or are promoted to take over a team, one would hope that the best scenario would be the person who was in charge before got promoted and now they're off doing something else within the company, or maybe they left the company for a higher profile or a bigger job that maybe was not in that company, right? So anytime someone leaves, don't always think it's for a negative. I personally, in my company, have had people who have left my company on good terms because they had an opportunity to elevate their career. I actually encouraged them. I've had conversations with people sitting in my office where they would say, I don't want to leave, I feel bad. And I would be the one to say, no, you have to leave. You're going to cap out in my company because of the size of our company. There's only so many positions of responsibility, but this other opportunity, there's so much more for you to do. And I've watched them grow, and it's encouraging and it's exciting for me to help people on my team fulfill their potential. But back to most of the times that someone is taking over a team, it's usually because results haven't happened. And we have a whole other episode about how do I get my people to perform well, top of their game, consistency, like what can I do to make sure I'm making sure they're performing, getting those results. But usually when results don't happen, I call, or my way of approaching structure in a business, I call them the 3 pillars. And there's 3 pillars that I think align or must align in order for teams or companies, businesses, projects to be successful. You have to have these 3 pillars in place. And when results don't happen, it's usually because one of these 3 pillars is not having the attention or focus that it deserves. We've taken it for granted. So it gets, think of a stool with 3 legs. If all of a sudden one is loose or not as tight, it wobbles. So we have to turn over the stool, find the leg that is wobbly, tighten it up so that we have a sturdy stool for us to sit on. Very similar for business. So Glenn, what are those 3 pillars? Well, in my mind, 3 pillars are processes, documented processes. The what are we doing? How are we doing it? So that everybody's following that same process. So in some of the videos I've shared my prior experiences, again, I was an actor for a long time, but I also worked in hospitality. I worked in restaurants. I worked in kitchens. The most successful restaurants had processes in place. They were documented. When I got hired for a restaurant that I worked in New York, it was a very upscale restaurant. Here is how we greet the table. Here's how we put in the order. Here's how we serve food. Here's how we clear plates. Here's how we present wine. Here's how we pour wine. Everything was documented. There was no Glenn feels like doing it this way today. So I think having documented processes allows 2 things. One, it allows you to hire the right people to fulfill the role. Now, some people will say that people are the 4th pillar, but we're going to push people off to the side just for a moment. But if I have documented processes and I say, this is the way we do business here, now when I'm hiring someone, I can hold up the job description and say, can you do this? Whether they have experience or not. When I was working at this restaurant, I remember the day that I went in for the interview, there was 12 or 15 other people who applied for this job. The very first thing they gave us was a copy of the menu. And they said, I want you to go home and study the menu. What goes in what dish, how, what are the side dishes, what are the names? And tomorrow when you come back, we're going to test you. Sure enough, I went home and studied because that's what they wanted me to do and I wanted the job. Came back, over half of the people instantaneously were cut because they didn't take it seriously. When they asked what accompanied this dish, the people who said, well, I don't really know, they said, did you study the menu? Well, thank you, bye. Like no playing around. It didn't matter that potential waiter waited at another very upscale restaurant. They were cutting people right out of the gate to say, if you're not willing to do this, you're not willing to learn our way of running our restaurant. It was not optional. You were a cog, a piece to deliver great customer experience. So documented process is going to help you, number one, find the right people, but it's going to be easy to hold people accountable to documented processes versus everybody's version of what they think you should be doing. The second pillar is training. It is both new hire training and ongoing training. Now, most companies and most businesses have a great new hire training. That's where they front load. And again, every new hire training probably could improve a little bit, but most times we walk them through. It could be a couple days, it could be a week, it could be a month. Now we're putting people through the paces to say, here's how we do this. Where most people fall off is they don't have an ongoing training process. There is no further. Once I learn what I do, I'm on my own. And then it's a gamble if I am following the processes or not. Maybe all of a sudden I start tweaking it and saying, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't, maybe I'll try this, I'll try. And all of a sudden, if I'm not generating results and someone at that time comes back and inspects what I'm doing, I'm so far off what's going on. But that's not it. Yes, it's part my fault as the individual, but it's also whoever's my leader, my coach, is not there helping me. So in the restaurant industry, you always had managers on the floor during service watching what was going on, both to help as needed, but they were watching service. And that next day, before we started the next day of service, we would get comments about how we did. So there was always this feedback loop. And there was also ongoing training. They always had new training every night before we sold a new special. We would taste it. The chef would come out and talk about it. They would have wine training, new wines every single month. New people would come in, talk about their wine. So again, there was always this ongoing training, but accountability to making sure the processes that we were doing, we were following them and executing on them at a high level. The third pillar in my mind is that word, accountability. There's two pieces of accountability to this. One, it's personal accountability. Finding the right people that are motivated to hold themselves accountable. I will talk about it in a future episode, but I'll touch on it here. I do not think you can motivate anyone. I don't think I can motivate you. I can present information to you. I can show you through my actions that I work hard. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm out on the floor. I'm working with you. And hopefully that inspires you, but I can't make you. I can't teach work ethic. I can't teach motivation. I can't get you to do anything. I can inspire you through my example, through my efforts. I can put you in a position through the documented processes, through the training, sell you on the results, the why it's beneficial to you, but ultimately it's up to you to hold yourself accountable to execute on those tasks, to show up on time, to be prepared, to learn, to constantly look back on how you did this day, this week, and say, what could I constantly do better? The other piece of the accountability as me, or you now, as the leader of this team, this division, this business, you have to think more along the lines of a coach. As we talked about in our very first episode, and also in the interview, episode 2 with Michael Cirillo, we talked about that vision, that mission, but it comes down to you as a leader have to have a coach's mentality of constantly giving feedback to your team. What's working? What's not working? And helping them develop the skills, refine the skills so that when they play the game, think of it as sports. We practice and then we play, but where are the coaches? They're watching. They're videotaping the game. What happens after the game is over? The next day, they're in training, in practice, looking at the videos to say, here's where we did a good job. Here's where we could do better. That's your job as a leader. When you're, whatever it is, if it's waiting tables, at the end of service, taking notes, tomorrow we're going to talk about it. If you're running a sales team, are you out on the floor watching your team actually interact with your customers while they're playing the game? Giving them notes, being available, coaching them, letting them know that was really good. Hey, you missed this. Even if you're having a sales phone room or a customer service room, or doesn't matter what you're running retail operation. When you're interacting, whatever that job is, when you're interacting with the consumer, maybe you're in the back in accounting, and a lot of people go, well, how is that? Well, if you're generating reports and you're presenting reports, or even if you're generating the reports and you're not talking to anyone, someone has to look at those reports and give you feedback on what's working, what's not working, what your process is, if you're missing deadlines, all of those things. That's the game that they're playing. That's your job to coach and develop. So in order to build that structure, you have to start thinking, what's my end result? What's the goal that I want to happen? And then I'm reverse engineering, going back and saying, okay, well, if this is what I want to happen, right? So if we take the example of, again, of a restaurant, or we do a lot of work, or I do a lot of work with our company with automotive dealers. So if someone comes into the dealership or the restaurant, when they leave, you as the manager, owner, leader of the team, how do you want that customer to feel? Do you want them talking about how great the experience was? They probably aren't talking about the price. They're talking about how they feel when they left. So then you have to say to yourself, okay, if that's how I want them to feel, well then what does my team have to do to generate those feelings? And we start writing those down. What actions are they going to have to do? And then we start building it into a process of, well, when a customer walks in, this is how we greet them. Then the next, when we move to this aspect of the sales process, this is what we do. And when we move over, so again, think of it from waiting tables. When someone walks in, the host or hostess greets them. That's a process. We bring them over to the table and we seat them. That's a process. The waiter comes over and introduces themselves. That's a process. Very similar again to sales. When I greet the customer, when we start interacting, if I'm bringing them to another person to interact. So if I'm going to evaluate their vehicle that they're trading in, all of these things are processes, actions, so that then I can train my team, right? That's the next piece, training the team, both short-term and long-term. We have a episode on how to train your employees, and we'll talk about that. How do I actually communicate and train to get this work done with the team? But we're training them short-term. Then we're building an accountability process of ongoing training, inspection, feedback on how they're executing these tasks. We may find that everything that we're doing, meaning that they're executing it correctly, but we might have to go back and tweak the process. It's not exactly what we thought is working, or we have to adjust, or customers like this but didn't like this. That's that feedback loop. That's that accountability loop that you as a leader have to do. You have to stand back and watch the game being played and be willing to make adjustments. And always say, if we're not getting the results we want, is it based on the execution? Meaning that we're working really hard, so the process needs to be tweaked. Or is it a fact of the process still is good, but we're not executing it correctly, so then I can target my training there. So I know that seems like a lot, but again, let's summarize. So building a structure, there has to have the 3 pillars to be successful. Documented processes. What exactly are we doing at every step of our business? Making sure it's written out so everybody knows exactly what's supposed to happen. Number 2, training, short-term, ongoing feedback loop, constant training, whatever schedule you want to do, but there has to be one. And then accountability. Investing in your team, from you, accountable to be there, to be that coach, to hold them accountable, to constantly be willing to tweak your structure, hold them accountable, and build up their own personal accountability to executing what needs to happen. And so again, then once we have those 3 pillars, then it's what's the experience we want to deliver? How do we want to make them feel? So then what actions have to happen? Then how do we document those and create these processes written out for each step? Then how do we train them on them? How do we hold accountable? And that loop just continues to go. And once you do that, once you have a structure, you can step on the gas, because then everybody's going in the same direction. If everybody's running in a different direction, when you step on the gas or you try to push on that, everything goes in a million different directions instead of stepping on the gas and everything goes straight. So the more processes, the more structured you are, the more free your people are to be able to listen and communicate and talk to the customers, because they are comfortable in that structure. They know what's coming next. So I hope you found that valuable. If you did, please click the subscribe button and ring that little bell there so you're notified when all new episodes are loaded up. I load up episodes and launch episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. So this way everybody has those. On Tuesdays, episodes like this, where I'm talking to you about my thought. Thursdays, I'm going to bring in someone else, a friend of mine or someone in the industry I respect, to talk about the exact same thing. So you have two different thought processes to fill up your toolbox, and that's really the goal, is to give you these tactics, right? Those 3 pillars are tools for your toolbox. So then when you're in this situation, you're taking on a new team, the first question you should be doing is pulling out your 3 pillars and say, do they have the structure? Do they have the training? Do they have the accountability? It'll give you a step ahead of everyone else, because now you have this tool in your toolbox to help you. As always, throw comments down in the bottom. I'd love to hear what you like, what you don't like. Always looking to improve myself. And if there's a question, I'll be more than happy to answer. Or if there's maybe a thought you'd like to have a topic for a future episode, please throw it in there. As always, I hope you'll share this with your network. There's so many people out there that need this type of help, that don't have this. They're trying to figure it out on their own, and I'm trying to cut that learning curve down maybe by 30, 40, 50%, because giving them these tools, they may never have thought about this before. So again, thank you so much for your time. And as I end every single episode, you're in charge, but now you have a new tool in your toolbox to help you become more successful. Thanks so much again, and see you next time.